When Women in Optics started, there were only 582 female SPIE members. That's 4% of the total membership. Now, there are over 3,300 female members of SPIE. That's 22% of the total membership. And this is partially due to new SPIE chapters who have a high number of female students. So Women in Optics has promoted women in science outside of SPIE with the annual planner highlighting the women and their success stories. And those are, some of them currently are in the back there. You might have picked them up. And the 2018 will soon come out. Be sure to look for that. Our program today has several elements, and to start, we will have a presentation on the results of a survey conducted by a Women in Optics task force that was chaired by Dr. Julia Craven. And that summary is also in the back when you came in, if you want to pick that up. Julia received her PhD in optical sciences from the University of Arizona in 2011, and that same year she joined the technical staff at Sandia National Laboratories in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Her research is focused on remote sensing, specifically visible and infrared spectral and polarimetric instrumentation and data exploitation. She serves as a subject matter expert in remote sensing for the U.S. delegation to the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treating Organization. As a member of SPIE Engineering, Science, and Technology Policy Committee here at the SPIE, Julia led the Women in Optics task force that was focused on identifying and recommending specific and measurable steps that our community can take to improve ongoing advocacy and career assistance for women, and also to attract more women to the field of optics and photonics and enhance their careers. To this end, the task force developed a series of questions to characterize and understand gender equality issues, and these were incorporated in the 2016 SPIE Global Salary Survey. Julia will present on this. Following her presentation, Julia will introduce our panelists and serve as moderator for our panel discussion on increasing diversity and inclusion in science and engineering. And the third part of this program, which kind of already started, is the social part. So please stay, enjoy the food and the drink. And please join me now in welcoming Julia to the podium. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming. This is a really exciting event. I know San Diego is a beautiful city, and it's pretty enticing to take off after the conference and go enjoy the city. So I really appreciate everyone taking time to be here and be part of this event. And I think it's going to be a really exciting and busy hour or so. So Mary Ellen just reviewed the agenda with you. I'm really excited to introduce the four panelists we have to speak with you today. I'm going to start by, again, giving a brief presentation on the results of our global salary survey with respect to gender inequality issues. And then I'll introduce our panel. We've asked each of our panel members to put together a short presentation on some of their background and their involvement in diversity and inclusion. So we'll give each of them an opportunity to speak. And then I've prepared a couple questions for the panel just to get us going. And then we'll open up the floor and we'll take questions from the audience if any of you want to ask our panelists some questions. And then finally, of course, we'll do a social for the last 20 or 30 minutes of the event. So with that, I'm going to just talk for maybe 10 minutes about the survey that we've been working on for about a year as a part of the Women in Optics Task Force. So Mary Ellen, oops, what did I push? There we go. So Mary Ellen already highlighted, this is a printed booklet that we have. So please, if you haven't already, grab a copy from the back of the room. Grab two, share one with one of your colleagues. I'm going to do just a very high level, highlight some of the key findings that we're presenting in that booklet. But if you're interested in some of the more specific details, A lot of the information I'm presenting today is going to be on the global level. We're going to be presenting global results from our survey, but the booklet itself will resolve a lot of our information into different regions. There's just a lot more high-resolution data in the booklet, so please go ahead and take a look at that to supplement what I'm going to be talking about today. So just to give everybody a little background on how this survey was motivated, Mary Ellen sort of gave us an introduction already, but basically this was born out of a discussion in one of the SPIE committees, the Engineering, Science, and Technology Committee. We were discussing different issues in our community that that committee could potentially pursue as far as tackling different issues that face the optics and photonics community. And one thing that we discussed was that many STEM surveys and studies conclude that STEM disciplines as a whole, so the broader STEM community, remains a challenging environment for women. So the question that was really on our mind was, how does our own community, how does the optics and photonics community measure up? So we formed a Women in Optics Task Force as somewhat of a subset of the ESTEP committee to try and answer this question and again provide recommendations that the society could use to try and improve gender equality in our community. So one of the first things we did as a part of this task force was try and identify what was the best way to gather information about what really are the issues facing the different genders in our community. And we decided that the best way to go about that was to do a comprehensive data gathering study. So let's survey our community and find out what the different issues are that are facing both men and women in the optics and photonics community. And so we formed a series of specific questions that were actually included in the Global Salary Survey, which is something you might be familiar with. It's an annual survey that SPIE performs. And we included those additional questions in that survey to address global or gender equality issues. We picked the Global Salary Survey for a couple reasons. For one, a lot of the questions that we wanted to ask had to do with pay and promotion, and so it was very synergistic with the types of questions that the Global Salary Survey usually asks. In addition to that, it's the highest impact survey that SPIE performs, so it typically gets the most responses of any survey the society conducts. So it was a great mechanism for us to get a large number of responses to our questions. So for the 2016 Global Salary Survey, or GSS, there ended up being almost 6,800 respondents, and of those 6,800, 17% were women. So it's about 1,150 women responded to the survey. So thank you for every one of you that responded and participated. This is really the basis of everything that's in that booklet, and everything I'm going to talk about today was formed based on your responses to our questions. So I only have a few minutes, so I'm just going to do some high-level highlights of what we found. So let's start with pay, right? This was a global salary survey. And so we globally asked our respondents to report their income and their pay as a part of working in the optics and photonics community. And here we're showing it as a function of years employed. So this is at the global level. Again, if you want to see specific information by region, please again take a look at the booklet. It's resolved in a lot more detail. But overall, at the global level, what our survey results indicated was that a pay gap exists between men and women at all career stages in our community, and the trend is that gap grows over time. So one thing I want to point out is this presentation is going to be very data-driven. We're going to present the facts and the results we had from our survey. I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to interpret these results. So one could look at these results and say, this is indicative that there's been recent changes in pay equality, and people that have been entered the workforce in the last few years have been paid at a more equal rate, regardless of gender, than people that have been in the workforce for 30 years. Or one could say this is a consistent trend. If you did this again 10 years from now, you'd see the same data. We don't have that historical data, so it's hard to make those interpretations. So instead of trying to interpret this data in detail, I think that this information, for one, is great for starting a conversation about why the things are the way they are, but also what do we want to see, right? What do we want the future to look like? If we redid the survey in 20 years, is this the trend we want to see? Or what actually do we want to see in our community? So just want to sort of preface all the data I'm going to be showing you with that disclaimer statement. So that's pay. Let's look at representation. So we asked our respondents to indicate the number of years they've been employed in optics and photonics. And so the global trend that's presented on the slide is that female workplace representation declines over time. The way I like to look at this data is that your first couple years in the workplace, over 1 in 4 of your colleagues are going to be women. But once you've been in our community for 30 years, you're only 1 in 9 of your colleagues are going to be of the female gender. So it's a pretty dramatic change over time. We see the representation of women in our community. So in addition to sort of basic pay representation questions, we also asked our respondents to give us information about things like job satisfaction. So we asked respondents to the survey whether or not they agreed to a series of statements related to different forms of job satisfaction. Overall, we saw a lot of similarity in the responses we got from men and women. However, the biggest discrepancies were in pay. So for example, 76% of men felt they were paid fairly, while only 69% of women agreed with that statement. And promotions, similarly, 65% of men felt that promotions were handled fairly in their organization, while only 59% of women agreed with that statement. So these are kind of findings that are a little softer, right? We're asking people to provide their opinion and their input on job satisfaction and what makes a workplace meaningful and worthwhile for them. But hopefully these types of statistics and information that we've gathered could be served not just for a call for individuals to action, but also for businesses to look in our community to look at these types of results and see how they stack up versus what people are reporting as far as job satisfaction. This one, we're going to talk about job challenges. It's a little bit of an eye chart. The data is in your booklet. If you're having a hard time seeing the numbers, I apologize for the smaller font. But basically what we did here is we asked respondents to identify their job title, and we used that information in combination with pay to identify how women and men perform when it comes to climbing the career ladder and being paid accordingly. So the two key findings I want to highlight on this chart is that a larger percentage of men in our community reach leadership positions than women. And in addition to that, women that do reach leadership positions are on average paid less than the men in those same positions. Just going to do a couple more and then we're going to move on, so I make sure I leave plenty of time for our panelists. But we also asked questions about children, caregiving, work-life balance. I'm going to highlight the first bullet on this slide, which is basically tied to, we asked how many women that were part of the workplace are working with children versus not working with children versus men. And ultimately what we found is that women are less likely to have children and work. And that's particularly strong in mid-career stages. So something, if you look at this chart, you can see anywhere from 6 to 20 years is where we have the strongest, what we're considering or calling a child gap. So ultimately this information suggests that more women than men are leaving our community after having children to try and balance both personal and career objectives. So this is my last slide. I actually found this one to be one of the more interesting findings that we had. We asked respondents to answer whether or not a particular workplace benefit was important to them. And a lot of the data I've shown you so far has been men versus women, and this one we resolved it with children or no children. And by children, we define that as children under the age of 18 in your household. I should have clarified that earlier on in the presentation. What we found was the top 5 categories as far as what people ranked as the most important benefits in their workplace, those were the same regardless of whether people had or didn't have children. So I guess, something that I sort of had as a preconditioned idea in my mind before we did this was these are going to be different, right? People that have children are going to want different things out of their job than people without children, and this is a big issue for workplaces to deal with. And we, did the data, and this is why I think it's so important that we take data instead of just going off of the opinion of people on a task force. And we saw a lot of similarities. So I think this is really interesting, right? If you're an employer and you're looking at what benefits are important to your staff, there's some great similarities here that apply to people whether or not they have children. So I thought this was a really interesting thing we found. So that was a really fast whirlwind tour through the booklet. I really hope I've encouraged you enough to grab a copy and take a look. I'm actually going to ask that we hold questions to the social after, just because we've got such a busy schedule and I want to leave enough time for everyone to ask questions of our panelists. But I did want to acknowledge this was a big effort by volunteers with SPIE as well as SPIE staff, so I'm just highlighting some of the major people that were participated in the task force and really turned this from an idea into an actual booklet that you're holding in your hands right now. So just want to thank all of you especially for taking the time and volunteering and working really hard on this. And so I really hope this is really the start of a conversation and we can use what we've done so far as a tool for actually producing actual change in our community. So I hope you feel that way too. We've got a website set up. I think the information is in the booklet. So after you take a look, if you want to join our conversation and talk about what you think would be important for improving gender inequality in our community, we'd be really happy to have you be part of our team and part of our conversation. So with that, let me get this out of the way. So with that, let me introduce our panel in no particular order, just the order I wrote down their bios. We've got a great panel. I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a really interesting event. So let me start with Leo Green. If you want to wave so everyone knows who you are, thank you so much. Leo received his bachelor's in chemistry at Hampton University in 2011. The following school year, he enrolled at the University of California, Riverside to pursue a PhD in bioengineering. His dissertation work involves the development of dynamic DNA-based nanostructures, and he is currently acting on the board of directors as a graduate student representative and liaison to the NSBE for the Council of Advancement of Black Engineers. Thank you, Leo, for joining us. Next we have Dr. Sonia Zárate, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand. Thank you. She received her BS in biology from Cal Poly Pomona and her PhD in plant molecular biology from UC Riverside. Currently, she is the director for the Office of Undergraduate Research at the University of San Diego, and she also serves as the Strategic Research Analyst for the Center for Inclusion and Diversity at USD. Dr. Zárate also works on the national level as an executive board member for the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Hispanics and Native Americans in Science, and a master facilitator for the NIH-funded National Research Mentoring Network. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Renu Tripathi, if you wouldn't mind, thank you, is an associate professor of physics and engineering at Delaware State University in Dover, Delaware. She is the co-director of the Optical Sciences Center for Applied Research at the university. She teaches several specialized courses in physics and optical engineering in the undergraduate as well as the graduate programs, and conducts research in the field of optics and photonics. She received her MS in Applied Optics and PhD in Physics from the Indian Institute of Technology. And she is the SPIE Student Chapter Advisor at DSU. Thanks for being with us. Stacey Delvecchio is the Fellow and Past President of the Society for Women Engineers. If you wouldn't mind raising your hand. Last but not least. She currently represents the American Association of Engineering Societies on the World Federation of Engineering Organizations Women in Engineering Committee and leads their efforts in the theme of engineering workforce diversity. Stacey was also part of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, as well as the White House's United State of Women. She holds a BS in Chemical Engineering from the University of Cincinnati and has been with Caterpillar Inc. for over 27 years. So let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us. So we're going to take a few minutes and give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves a little bit more and talk about their programs. So Leo, why don't we start with you? And there's a slide advancer there, or I'm happy to push them for you.
All right. So, hello everyone. I don't know if that's me. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my watch. I don't know. Okay, so I'm representing the Council for the Advancement of Black Engineers. So I'm gonna start out a little bit about my journey because I think it's pretty important that sometimes people understand, or for people to understand that your path isn't always a direct path. It could be a little windy. So when I was in high school, I was actually really interested in design, so kind of fashion design and home decor. So, but my parents kind of convinced me to study engineering, and my school was cool enough to allow majors, so I majored in engineering, thinking that that was architecture. I had no idea what it was. And then after high school, my parents I enrolled at Hampton University to study civil engineering, but the summer before I got there, I spoke with my parents, and they told me that maybe I should think about medicine, so I started thinking about that. So I changed my direction again and studied chemistry to pursue becoming a dermatologist. I've always had an interest in hair, skin, and nails. And then studying chemistry, I needed to pay for school a little bit, so I got into research and did a few internships there and realized that having engineering in your background is a really good idea to make more money. So I put together engineering and this newfound research passion that I had and decided to go into bioengineering because I was still medical related. And now I do DNA nanotechnology. And so I kind of tried to make a little DNA double helix out of this, but it's kind of weird because my path kind of came full circle. So I started out with this idea that I wanted to design homes and go into fashion also, which I'm still interested in. But now I design DNA nanostructures, and these aren't my nanostructures. I actually work with nanotubes, but it's still a form of design and at a molecular level. So my plan is to combine all my interests and passions and to work in the field of medicine while designing DNA drug delivery particles, hopefully. So now to CABE. So our mission, this little diagram here, just illustrates from a few databases that I saw the percentages of African Americans pursuing and getting PhDs. So that's roughly about 6%, which is really, really small. So our mission is to increase this over the years, not just in size, but actually in number. And our plan is to do that through mentorship, awareness, because I feel that sometimes Black students coming from high school, middle school, they don't know what a PhD is. They don't know what a PhD is. So just getting that awareness out and increasing the number of African American PhDs in the field of engineering. So thank you.
Thank you, Leo. All right. I think this is Sonia's. Would you mind going next? Okay, great.
Thank you. All right, so I'm not necessarily going to talk about my background, although I can say that SACNAS, which stands for the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans in Science, is an organization that I've been a part of since 1998 when I was an undergraduate. And it's really a privilege for me to be on the other end of that relationship and actually able to give back. So it's a wonderful organization. It was founded in the 70s, and as the story goes, there was a meeting at AAAS in DC, and there was a handful of Latino, Chicano, Native American science that got in the elevator together and said, wow, if something happened to this elevator, that would wipe out all of the Chicanos and Native Americans that are scientists right now. So they started this organization. It's an inclusive organization, even though the name implies that it's only for Hispanics, Chicanos, and Native Americans. It's actually for anyone that can use mentorship, but we do focus a lot of our attention and our resources to those populations of students. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. So dedicated to fostering the success of Chicanos, Hispanics, Native Americans, pursuing STEM academics and careers, so not just one discipline, but many. And the mission is to increase the number attaining advanced degrees, careers, and positions of leadership in STEM. And so our ideal is that every last Chicano, Hispanic, Native American would attain a PhD. And so this is just some of the pictures of our founders. Our first president to the far left, right here, is Eugene Cota-Robles, and this is the board now. We have a lot of cultural opportunities that happen at the national conference, which is our pinnacle, and again, I'll talk about that, which include blessings by Native Americans. And in terms of the positions of leadership, here we have some of our founders, Dr. Marigold Linton and Dr. Richard Tapia, who are now receiving medals from President Obama. So this is the level we would like to get everyone who participates with SACNAS to. So this is just some data from the National Science Foundation website. And so what I wanted to point out was that, in 1975, all science and engineering degrees, there was about 15,000 of them. And of those, 151 were received by Hispanics and 13 were received by Native Americans. And so when you contrast that to 3 decades later, which is what you see over here, right? So there's 17,271 degrees conferred, PhD degrees. 916 or 5% of those are to Hispanics and 0.06% are to Native Americans. And when we break that down even further, this is females, and I get it, it's small. So Julie, I think I beat you on the data smallness. For females, 45, and this is percentages now, and this is what you're seeing here, right? So 45% of them went to females. Of those females, 3% were Hispanic and 0.3% were Native American. And so even focusing further to mathematics or physical sciences or engineering, the numbers are even bleaker, right? So 1% women, 2% women, 1% women. So that's 3 decades later from when this organization was founded. And then this is 2014, so 4 decades later. And my bars are crooked on this, but we haven't made much progress in terms of Hispanics and Native Americans, and even less so with women. And so the numbers are covered, even I can't read them. So I just to say that, there is a definite need for this organization, and it's the great hope of SACNAS to one day not be needed, right? So that is our greatest goal. So what is SACNAS? As I mentioned, we have our annual conference that is the starship of what we do. Since 1973 to 2015, we have grown from, I believe there was 50 participants at the 1973 SACNAS National Conference, and now last year when we were in DC, there's 3,746 attendees, broken down by gender. We do have a very even representation of men to women, and that's what we're looking at here. And then we have a distribution of, who attends, undergrads mostly and professionals, as well as broken down by ethnicities. So again, very inclusive society, not just for Chicanos and Native Americans in STEM. And in terms of attendees by discipline, currently we do have the majority of participants coming from biomedical research facet, but we are working to increase that, the other disciplines as well. And so SACNAS is the largest multicultural and multidisciplinary STEM diversity organization in the country, and we plan to just get more and more diverse. And so the 2016 SACNAS conference, actually it should be 2017. I apologize. No, it is this, I'm sorry, it is this October. It is happening this October in Long Beach. So if you love San Diego, Long Beach, California, which is right up the coast, is amazing, just like this. So we welcome you. We invite you to come. And so at our annual national conference, we have total student presentations, 865. So we have a lot of different activities. So students are able to present, undergraduates posters, graduate students oral presentations. We have recruiters coming from 309 different organizations. So students and professionals get to network and meet people that can help them advance in their careers. We honor and recognize culture. So this is the one place where since I was an undergraduate and first walked in, did not have to check my culture at the door, kind of like I do at the laboratory. And so we also recognize our leaders. We have a lot of different professional development sessions, scientific symposia, leadership development. So this is what the annual conference looks like. And then we have year-round programming that's grown since, obviously, 1973. We have 110 student as well as professional chapters, so all together. We have regional meetings. We have leadership institutes. So there are, since 2009, 240 SACNistas have gone through the SACNAS Leadership Institute. And then we just recently had our first Advanced Leadership Institute for those that have participated in the SLI, and so we had 15 alumni go through that. And then we also have policy and advocacy strategies because we like to make sure that our voices are represented and that we are also at the table vying for this population. And so that is my presentation.
Thank you. Okay. I think this is you, Stacey.
Thank you.
Take it away.
So I'm Stacey Delvecchio, and I'm here with the Society of Women Engineers, and I was a president of the society 2 years ago, and last year I was honored to be inducted in as a fellow of the society as well. And I'd say this kind of sums it up. Belonging is like solving many career and life challenges at once. Our mission is really to help stimulate women to realize that engineering can be a fulfilling career path, and to help people remove the barriers and provide a sense of community for the people. So it goes beyond just having a group of women together to talk about whatever we talk about, but to really stimulate women that it's a viable career path. A couple of things that the society is really known for. We have gone through a huge growth spurt in the past 10 years, and we're sitting at 35,000 strong now, which is a record for us. We're 65 years old, and it took us a while to get there, but we're really proud of that number. We have over 130 professional development webinars that are available in our library, and those are free to any member. And there are more webinars that come out every month. So they're recorded, and people can go and look at the library, or as the new ones come out, they can look at those. They range from anything, some technical options, to things like we had a financial series that ranged from people in their 20s and 30s to people in their 30s and 40s and people at 50 on up, so that we could provide information for the different demographics. And then our annual conference and career fair is the biggest that is out there for women engineers. We're hoping to hit 10,000 at our conference this year that's also in October, but we're going to be in Philadelphia. And and on top of all that, we do have about half of our members are students, and we're hoping to move the needle more to have more professionals, because I can't tell you the number of times I'm in a room like this and people say, I was a member of SPIE in college. And it's like, well, there's a lot of opportunities for you as a professional as well. But we do have a great online career center where you can manage your resume, and then the corporations come and we'll search those for potential matches. We have a magazine that's been going for 65 years, and I am amazed. We've got a relatively small editorial staff, and each year we win several awards. So it's a well-managed magazine that not only talks, there's a little bit of SWE business, but it's more about the state of women engineering versus just being about SWE. And similar to, I think, all of my colleagues up here, we have a big interest in outreach. A lot of people like to give back, and they want to get kids excited about engineering, and so there's a huge outreach program organized at the society level, but then also at individual local level, those sections that I talked about. And then a great awards program. We have expanded our awards program in the past several years so that we cover all ranges of women's careers, as well as recognizing men, because we need men as diversity partners in order to get where we need to be as women engineers. And then we are women, but we do have, within the women's ranks, the women engineers, we do have affinity groups. So some of them are listed up there, African American, Latina, LGBT allies, and they meet. A lot of that is in more of an electronic format, so we have Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups where there could be some good dialogues. We actually have an affinity group for working moms, and one of our top posts ever was our president-elect had pulled together some information from that Facebook group on what it means to be you're a mama engineer or something like that, and topping things like you are if you reach these, and it was just great to see all the mothers contributing to what it means to be a mother as an engineer. And then we also have an advocacy program. I've gone for the past 6 years and gone to advocate for women with our congressmen and to be sure that they understand the issues on the Hill so that they can pass the right bills, in our opinion. That's it.
Thank you. All right. Last but not least, go for it, Renu.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, SPIE, for inviting me to share this stage with all these tremendous people who are working so much to include diversity in everything that we do. So I'm from Delaware State University, and this is an HBCU, which is historically black college and universities. And this particular institution was established in 1891, and there are 107 of these which were established after the civil wars in US. So it is an undergraduate institution, so primarily our population, number one, this started as an African American institution, so we do have a lot of minorities in the undergraduate population. And also, per NSF definition, is a non-PhD granting institution, although we do have a graduate program in optics. So we do have 5 colleges and one recently made institute called Delaware Institute of Science and Technology, which I represent here. And our graduate program is, we offer master and PhD in applied optics and optics, respectively. And this is a new building that we created, or the state made, to help us do research in optics. So my perspective is a little different from these ladies and gentlemen here. I will be talking mostly based on our experience with the graduate program, how we are dealing with the student population to include diversity. And so it's very specific to our program. So traditionally, the idea of diversity, it falls into, in my opinion, in 2 different ranks. Number one, people analyze data based on men, women, or number 2 is based on the race. So somebody is Caucasian, somebody is African American, someone is Hispanic, woman, man, and all that. And some of these divisions may not be applicable globally, but in the United States we do have these. So what is our perspective? In our graduate program, it's a very small program, but we want to create a diversity which is not just confined to these categories, but we have a global mix, because in this global society, in some ways, we believe that we have to be blind to race or gender or anything. We are engineers and scientists, and of course, it's very difficult to break the typecast that people have about how a woman should look like, what they should be doing, and same thing for different races. But in our program, we are trying a parity between how many students that we take, are they US citizen or not. So we want to keep 2/3 of the population as US citizen and 1/3 as non-citizens, so people can learn from each other. And within this 2/3 of US citizen, we want to keep 1/2 as the US majority, could be Caucasian or other categories, and the other half as the minorities, which will include women. So of course we are not there yet. So I will show some of the statistics. I was looking for the data on what's happening in the bigger scheme of works in United States. So in sciences, so the latest data which is available from NSF right now is the census they did in 2012, although it's reported in 2014. And I was only looking at the graduate students enrolled in a graduate program, not the students who got a degree or not undergraduate population. It's the number of students who are enrolled in the graduate program. So if you look at the United States sciences, and this will include everything from biology, chemistry to even engineering. So in science and engineering in US, the division of male-female is almost equal because a lot of women tend to do researches in biological sciences. And if we divide this whole thing per different races, then this is how the reality looks like. Now, my discipline is in optics, and most of our students are actually enrolled in the physics department, although we do have some students who come from computer science or mathematics. So I am actually comparing my data with the physics data for the United States Census available through NSF. And this is the picture for United States Physics 2012. 80% male, 20% women, and this is the other picture where we hardly see some of the things like women or Hispanics or African American in this. So like Leo said, there is a very small percentage of African American students who are graduating with a master's or a PhD degree. So next slide, I have the data for Delaware State University. Of course, our numbers are very small. The program started in 2008, so it's only 8 years, and we haven't really graduated many students with PhD. But if I just show you some of the things, in the male-female story, we do have a little more number of women compared to men. And, sorry, this is the DSU optics, yes. And this is the race division. So this is 2012, but over the years, starting from 2009 to 16, if you look at it, the men and women ratio has kind of stayed similar, but different races have come and gone. So we are still working on trying to find a right balance of how the student population should look like to create a proper balance. And this is another one. This is the United States citizen or non-citizen. So you can see that in 2015, we did have a nice ratio between them, but in 2016, we do have more non-US citizens. So in conclusion, in this slide, I just put the conclusion, but I will discuss some of the efforts that we are making to find a right balance. So as I said, this is an age of globalism. People are working everywhere with everything, so we got to be color, race, and gender blind, but still it doesn't happen. So what we do to find the right balance of the students, we do go to different conferences like NSBE and Chicano conference. We work with the agencies who fund our research to talk to them to allow us to give tuition waiver and scholarship to non-US citizens. We also do outreach activities, and one thing, altogether, we are just trying to make some conscious efforts so that we can include diversity in our education. Thank you.
Thank you. So thanks to all of you for those great introductions. I'm going to just put up a background slide while we're talking so that the changing background isn't too distracting. Okay, so with that, I have a couple of questions I'm going to ask our panelists. I'm not going to ask any of you specifically a specific question, so just jump in if you feel compelled to answer. And then once we go through these, we'll open up to the floor, and if those of you in the audience have questions for our panel, we'll have some time for that. Okay, so let me get started. Here's my first question. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing women and underrepresented groups in science and engineering today? How has the landscape changed, and where do you see it going? Thank you.
I'll start. I think there has been so much effort of late, I'd say in the past 5 years, on getting kids interested in STEM. My mom knows what STEM means. It's common language, common, I guess, maybe for technical people. But there's a lot of work going on in that front. What I'm really worried about is the women that are leaving the pipeline after they start working. So it's called the leaky pipeline. As far as half of the women, when they graduate, don't even end up going into an engineering job. I'm an advocate for women engineers at Caterpillar, where I work, and it's just, there's, I think, our environment is indicative of corporate America, and women are just opting out. And that's my biggest concern, is how do we get people that have gone through the hard part, they've gotten trained as an engineer, and then we can't keep them in the workforce.
That was something we noticed in our survey, was there was definitely a gap at a certain point when people were dropping out of our community. Anybody else want to take a stab at that question?
So definitely, biggest challenges are actually admitting that we have a problem. So this idea of colorblind or gender blind, we're never going to get anywhere if we don't admit that there is bias and that a lot of assumptions are made about populations, and that, this is going to perpetuate this good old boys club. Sorry, guys. We need allies, though.
Please.
So in the lines of what Sonia was saying, I think not to not admit that there is no bias, but actually to admit that there is bias, but to start educating children early enough that they are aware that they should not be having all these biases, because a lot of it has perpetuated over the ages with families, with the society and all these backgrounds. So if a child learns early enough to accept who is what for what they are, all these biases will go over time. Yes, of course, it will take years because that's how the society is built, but there will be someday when we won't have these biases.
Okay. You can't resist.
So I think one way of trying to fix it, and this is probably same for all minority groups, is to have that confidence and strength to be a pioneer, so that you could be the face for the women after you. For example, if you are a professor or you want to be a professor, I think that really helps out with the women that are taking classes to have that confidence that they too can succeed as a woman engineer or minority engineer.
I think that's a great intro to my next question, so thank you. So my next question to the panel is, what is an effective approach that you have used or observed to promote awareness regarding diversity and inclusion in science and engineering?
I think the best approach when you're dealing with a bunch of engineers is to start with the data and to really convince people that diversity is important, and not just say, yeah, it's the right thing to do and pull on kind of the heartstrings, but to go to the data that talks about diverse teams really do provide a better solution. And if you can get people to really understand that, and I'd say companies, that's my background, corporations, they should be really nervous when they look at their employee base and realize that they don't have a lot of diversity in the employee base, because the data shows diverse teams come up with the better ideas. So if you can start with that data and start to convince people that it's not just the right thing to do, because it is the right thing to do, but it also makes good business sense. And if you can tie it to the bottom line, then that starts to get some more action than not. Yeah, and I want to say absolutely. I think that is this strategy to do. And then I think that
following back up on your previous comment as well, this idea of, why are we leaving, right? Why are we leaving if we're getting in there, we're getting our degrees, and we get the jobs, and then we leave? And so I think that the other strategy that we like to take is training people on, making them aware of assumptions and bias again, right? So you can get someone to that position, or you can get yourself, and you can lift up other women. But if you just come to the same environment at work or in grad school or as an undergrad, where maybe your whole self is not valued, then it's just going to perpetuate that same cycle. So I think that I read a wonderful article, an op-ed piece, that talked about people and training people to be culturally sensitive, right? Talked about them as first-generation equity, what did it call them? They were like first-generation equity people, right? So they had never necessarily had to even think about what it's like to be a woman, right? Or what it's like to be a minority in science. And so, training people and letting them know, that there is something that's happening, there's some difference that's happening that is shutting people out or making people leave. Making them more aware of practices, implicit bias that you don't necessarily even think about. And we all have bias. We all have bias. And so making people aware of it and making sure that their policies and procedures have something in place to make sure that that is brought to the forefront always. Yeah. Practitioners, first generation equity practitioners.
Please, thanks.
I think one way we can handle this is by creating a very strong support network. So for the women and the students from especially the first generation students, if they had a network which will support their studies, especially women who tend to have families, children and everything, and in the first generation families, they don't really have people who can understand what they are doing. So that network, if it exists in schools, universities, that will help them tremendously. And number two, some kind of a role model who can create some confidence in them that yes, it's possible, and with the help of their network and their friends and the advisors, they might have an academic advisor and also some secondary advisor who helps them with their other problems that could help this.
I like that you brought up mentoring. I feel like that's something we talk about a lot, but I think there's something about quality mentoring or making like a true connection with someone that's really like on another level versus it seems like you hear a lot. You got to have a mentor. You got to have a mentor, right? I think what you're really getting at is that relationship has to go beyond just regular career advice, right? I mean, to be a really impactful mentor, you want to be inclusive of the whole array of issues everyone faces as an early career person or even past that, right?
Yes, that's true. There are some people who are extremely dedicated to, say, education, and they would connect with those students in ways that other professors cannot. So we need those kind of people who can actually, we can utilize them for this purpose.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to comment on, Sonia, what you said made me think of one of the quotes in the booklet is about, I'm going to, not get the words completely right, but it's about being a female in STEM is sort of like being in a zebra in a room, but that could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? You see a zebra, it's bright and flashy when you're looking at it. But what you were talking about really resounded with me about, we're not making progress until underrepresented groups and women aren't seen as a zebra in a room necessarily, right? We want to be valued for what we bring to the table technically.
I think I can relate to it. When I was undergraduate student, I had 148 boys in my class, and I was the only female in this class.
Oh, wow.
But for some reason, nobody noticed it. Even I didn't notice it because I was never raised with that awareness of men versus women. But I can relate to it now that when I joined Delaware State University, in one of the meetings, somebody introduced me as the female faculty. And at that moment, it just hit me hard that this is an issue that people deal with in this country.
Wow, yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor. Okay, so many organizations have been advocating for increasing diversity and inclusion in science and engineering for decades. Some of you represent some of those organizations. Yet most disciplines have not observed substantial changes in constituency. Why do you think that is, and what else do you think can be done?
So I guess I'm going to answer and tell a short little story. As a scientist, right, even as an undergrad and as a grad student and as a postdoc, we're busy. We're in laboratories. We're in our research spaces. As an undergrad, I took science courses, and because of discussion sections or laboratories, I took other classes, right, the general education requirement, but only what could fit in. So I didn't really make any conscious choices about what I was taking in addition to my science courses. And I think one of the things, aside from the mentoring, which is so important, and I advocate for people to have many, many, many mentors, right, because one person cannot fulfill, all roles. And then, thinking about policies and how those impact what we do, because we say, well, of course, we're hiring them because of this. We're looking at this merit criteria. But I think the other thing that I hadn't necessarily thought of, and when you were speaking about your experience as an undergraduate and even my own, I could probably tell the same thing. Like, I didn't really notice that I was, the zebra, the unicorn, whatever, even though I was. But I must have noticed, because when I went to the SACNAS conference, all of a sudden I felt like, oh, this is home, right? And this is why I want to give back to that organization. And so the thing that's different is that I didn't have the knowledge, the theory, or even the words. If you would have asked me, like, what is implicit bias as an undergrad, I'd be like, I don't know. I'm not trained in that. Right? And so it wasn't until I was at UCLA and I sat in on a presentation to train peer mentors that I even heard anything close to the lines of bias, assumptions, critical race theory. Like, I had no idea. And it was so empowering, and I was already a professional. So I think that the other piece to help move that needle is to begin to make it a requirement for students as early as undergrads to learn about these diversity and inclusion issues so that they have a word for it. It's like, oh, that's what I'm feeling. I as a woman, I didn't know as a woman, that I was being tokenized, right? I didn't know those words then. And so I think it would be very empowering to have diversity training for students as well, so that they realize that it's not them and stop feeling like imposters.
I think another way to fix this is networking earlier. I think a lot of times minorities wait for key occurrences such as conferences to network, but I think networking should be a consistent thing that should go on throughout the school year. So when I work with NSBE students, I see that most of the time they develop their resumes for the national conference, which is at the end of March, and quite frankly, that can be a little late when looking for jobs for the following year. Instead, they should be looking at other opportunities, such as going to the SACNAS conference or coming to conferences like this, although they may not be in that specific class, whether it's female or male or African American or whatever it is. They should still use these opportunities that are geared towards diversity and minorities to network and find jobs and meet other professionals within their career.
So while I'm really worried about our leaky pipeline of professionals, I do think the why have we not made a big change is because it does go back to the messaging that we have for engineering. A lot of engineers get excited about giving back and going and talking about engineering to little kids, and stereotypically an engineer is not always the best communicator. So you might go and you send an engineer to talk to a bunch of 10-year-olds, and they'll talk, I don't know, they'll say something like, oh, study really hard, and the course is really hard, but if you study really good, you'll get a job and make a lot of money, and and so as a woman or little girls, they're like, oh, that doesn't sound very exciting. And then like the next week, they'll bring in the vet and they'll say, we save kittens. And so then people want to go and be a vet because there's no problem with diversity in things like medicine and veterinary science. And so it's just like we've got the wrong people going to try to get the kids excited. Now, of late, we've been doing a much better job because I think we're enlisting the help of professionals that know how to communicate versus sending a bunch of engineers to communicate to the kids. But for years and years and years, it was always like, oh, we have the engineers go talk to the kids, and we weren't necessarily the best ones to do it.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I know. Nobody in this room can relate, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to answer? Okay. Well, great. Let's give a quick round of applause. Thank you guys so much. So we have a few minutes. I know what everyone wants is at the back of the room, but we have a few minutes. If anyone wants to ask questions, please. Oh, lots of hands. Wonderful. Okay, I saw. Are we doing a mic? I actually don't. We are. Okay, great. Go for it.
Hi. So I'm not sure whether you've heard of a recent Harvard study that showed like STEM fields which tend to have a belief in which innate ability is important for success tends to push women away. So I was just wondering, first thing is if you heard this study and what you think of this study, and if this is indeed a true statement, what can be done about this belief? Thank you.
So I don't think it's a true statement because there's plenty of really successful women engineers and scientists. There's a recent study that came out that talked about calculus in college and that more women drop out after they do poorly at Calculus 1 their freshman year than men who get the same grade, but they stick with it because the men feel like, oh, that was good enough and I'll keep going, where women don't have as much confidence and so they drop out. And then it perpetuates because, then we get good incoming freshman classes, and it just goes down. But all of the studies show that as early, like in junior high, that especially in math, that women often are scoring better than men. So I don't think it's a innate thing. I think it's more of the other issues of desire and confidence that makes them not stick with it.
Go ahead. We can have a few people line up if you want.
Hi. Oh. Hello. So you keep referring to this leaky pipeline, right? Don't you think the problem is that a lot of the programs that your organizations that you represent, they focus a lot of their effort on recruitment and getting students interested, but they don't focus on retention? Because I'm a graduate student, a PhD candidate right now, and the thing is, you don't meet other people like yourself until you go to these type of conferences. So you say that we don't develop our resumes until late, simply because we don't have the mentors or people around us that motivate us or guide us, right? So I personally think, and I don't know if you agree with me, that about the retention programs, and if you think that that is something your organizations could look into.
Yeah, I think that's a very great point. So myself, I had the issue throughout my PhD studies. I'm now entering my 6th year and should be finishing in December. Yay! But it was very difficult for me because I didn't have people who looked like me to support me, and often I felt that I was the only one there supporting myself. Of course, my parents, but they never been through it, and I think that's also another issue that a lot of minority students deal with. And that's why I kind of met with my mentor and told him like, hey, we need a support system for African Americans in the PhD program, because there's a lot for undergraduates, and that's why we kind of started CABE. So we started out just getting together, having dinner every so often, and now we're trying to develop it into something much larger. But I think retention is a very, very big thing, and I'm not too sure how to go about it though.
Yeah, so I always think about, what we do with undergrads and graduate students, right? So with undergraduates, we have support services, like they get to campus, like they're getting to my campus, and we're just throwing stuff at them. They're constantly supported. And now we're trying to make sure that they are actively engaged in their own learning process, right? So making sure that science is taught like science is really done, to try to engage students and keep them in STEM early. And then for graduate students, it's like the opposite, right? So you have that engaged learning, it's mostly hands-on, but you don't have the student support services. And even if you did, I am sure that every one of you in your, graduate studies, has come across this, I can't go, either because your mentor doesn't want you to go, or maybe they don't really say that, but they're kind of like, what? What are you doing? And so one of the ideas would be to make sure that programming that's professional development, whether that be how to write grants, how to apply for fellowships, how to write a manuscript, an internship, because you don't want to go and be an academic, right? Maybe you want to go work in industry. So an industry mentor and internship should be part of the programming. So nobody says you can't go. It's like, if it's part of the programming, you go, right? And so there's no one stopping you, whether it's explicitly stopping you or kind of subtly letting you know that you should be in your research space researching. So I think that would be one great approach, is just to make sure that the programming was required. Because even if I have equally competing responsibilities, which graduate students do, right? If it's like required of me in order for me to graduate, I'm going to go. But if it's not required, I'm going to go do that other thing that I have to do that's just as important. So making it a requirement, I think, is a great approach.
So a couple of things the Society of Women Engineers has done. The one that I'm most excited about, in the past year, they've launched a STEM reentry task force, and it's geared towards women that have had a significant career break and they want to re-enter the workforce. So there's 7 pilot companies, of which Caterpillar is one of them, I'm proud to say, where there's internships. It's all in a pilot mode, but they're internships for people that are coming back into the workforce. Could be 2, 4, 5, 10 years out. And it's a model that has been very successful in the finance industry, and we've been working with a company called iRelaunch in order to copy that model in the STEM field. So that's great, because there's so many women out there that did take a break and now they want to come back. So that part is really great. But then also just the fact that some of our webinars and our programmings are actually geared towards women that are mid-career, or it's not just that, oh, I'm a new supervisor, but it's, now I'm a manager, or I'm getting ready to manage a profit and loss statement. And I didn't learn about that in engineering school, so there's a course for that. So there's some aspects that are not just about students, kids, or even the students that are just getting into the workforce. It's more for the people in their 30s and 40s and 50s.
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to take one more question. There was someone waiting in line. We're going to have a social after this, so please stick around. I'm sorry we can't get everyone's questions, but I'm going to ask for one more. Please go ahead.
I personally always have a debate with myself over whether or not to say something if I encounter someone who makes a comment that has an implicit bias to it. It's not malicious, it's not intentional, but clearly there's some attitude that is biased. And do I be polite and say nothing, or do I perhaps be a little impolite but raise a stink? And it's always a question I ask myself. I'd like to know what your guys' personal strategy is with that.
So I think some of that with age, you get a lot more vocal. And so I'm usually the only woman in my peer group. And if somebody makes something like, my thing is gal, I hate being called gal, so especially if the email comes and says guys and gal, because I'm the only one, I'm like, really? And so I tell them, part of my role on the team is to help you guys understand when you say something that might be taken the wrong way. So that kind of goes okay with my peer group. And then it is several years ago, like 10 or 15 years ago, I was a shop foreman. And I had a guy who called me honey, and I hate honey. That's another one. I hate hey honey or whatever he was calling me. And so I took him aside separately and just said, pet peeve of mine, please don't call me honey. I know you mean well by it. That's how you're raised, but I don't like it. And it spread like wildfire throughout the shop how I handled the situation because I didn't embarrass him in front of everybody. And then they like thought the world of me because I like told them that I didn't like honey, but I did it one-on-one. So I think it really helps to address it. And find somebody that you see that does it well, and try to copy the way they did it or something like that.
Yeah, so I'm also a huge advocate for speaking up, but I'm also mindful of power dynamics, right? So if you're a student and it's your PI, you know what I mean? But I would absolutely speak up. And so one strategy to potentially take, if this is like, you feel it, right? You're just, oh my God, it's like almost somebody smacked you in the face. I mean, you can definitely say, you said something to me and I'm going to think about it a little bit and maybe we can schedule a meeting later on so that we can talk about it. Or you can even say, I want to get back to something that you said, so I really want to schedule a meeting. Check your calendar, get on the calendar like right away, and then go away and just try to process it. So for me, processing is like, did I do something? And then I'm mad. No, I didn't do something. They did something. And then I can finally get to a place where I can actually address it, and not be confrontational. Because again, this idea of first generation equity practitioners, I always love to ally, right? So I want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And so I don't want to, not have allies. And so the way that you come to someone and you let them know is key. But if there's a power dynamic there, then definitely I would use the defer strategy, but make sure that you actually set something in the calendar and say, I want to talk to you about something else, but I don't have time right now. Like make another excuse. But talk about it, because if you don't, you are part of the problem, right? How else are they going to know?
And think about how much change you could make, right? If you have a really valuable conversation with someone, you could change their whole outlook.
Yeah.
I also want to add that I think it's really important that you do say something because sometimes they aren't aware that they're doing it. So for example, I get comments about like rappers and stuff all the time, right? But it's kind of sometimes just a way that they could break down the barrier for their personal comfort level too. So I might joke around and say something like, I don't know who Kendrick Lamar is, right? But of course I might know who that rapper is, but it's just a joke. And then they're like, wait, really? And I'm like, no, I'm just kidding, right? So, so I do that sometimes, but then if it's something that is borderline offensive, then I will pull them aside like everyone else says and talk to them about it. But then I also let them know that I'm not down on it, or I don't judge them for saying what they said. It's, hey, you said this, kind of was not okay, but let's move on and let's get past it. So.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for the great questions. Again, if you have another question, I'm going to invite our panelists to stick around for as long as they can. Let's give them one more round of applause. Thank you guys so much.